Agenda Setting Theory, presentation by Alyssa Messina. Who is responsible for the creation of this theory? Maxwell McCombs and Donald Shaw. McCombs and Shaw supported their hypothesis with results from surveys they took while working together at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill during the 1968 presidential election between Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey. Main points. What are the main points of this theory? McCombs and Shaw believe that the mass media have the ability to transfer the salience of items on their news agendas to the public agenda. We look to news stations and professionals for cues on where we should focus our attention. The media does not tell us what to think, but rather what to think about. Media agenda in newspapers includes the front page headline story, a 3-column story on an inside page, and the lead editorial, because the paper has put focus on those stories. Media agenda in television news is the first 3 news items or any discussion that lasted more than 45 seconds. Results support the notion that the media are just as market-driven in their news coverage as they are in what entertainment programs they choose to show. How it works. So how does the theory work exactly? 1. Measure the media agenda. Position and length of a story are the 2 main criteria of prominence. 2. Measure the public agenda. Survey your candidates. 3. Assign specific answers to same broad categories used for media analysis. And 4. Compare data. Examples. Examples of this theory in the real world. Number 1. The 2016 presidential election. Media began 24-hour election coverage from the moment candidates started their announcements. Russia is now being accused of meddling in our election by putting out fake posts on social media platforms such as Twitter and Facebook. These said posts were persuasive, pushing one or the other candidate's agenda. Number 2. Social media. As a whole, social media is an example of this theory in today's world. Every time you get on a social media platform, you see an opinionated post, whether from trusted sources or not, that are affecting the way you think or the decisions you make, sometimes without you even realizing it. 3. The 2017-2018 flu season. This explains how media agenda can also affect behavior. While this chart from USA Today shows that this flu season was not as bad as years past, media coverage this year was off the charts, causing chaos and fear. With this theory, you can determine how media coverage of the flu one week predicts the number of doctor visits the next week. Critique. How well does this theory meet the criteria of describe, explain, predict, and control? Describe. The theory does a good job of describing how broadcast and print journalism set by the media affect individuals' priorities, thoughts, and behaviors. The downfall is that McCombs and Shaw focus primarily on how media agenda affected individuals politically instead of their beliefs as a whole. Explain. The theory thoroughly explains key terms such as media agenda, public agenda, index of curiosity, framing, and public opinion. All these terms are essential to the learning and understanding of this theory. On the contrast, the theory only explains why media agenda affects the salience of some issues for some people some of the time. In other words, the theory cannot be used objectively. Predict. In the studies described in the chapter using this theory, the hypothesis does prevail. The hypothesis being that the public's agenda for the prominence of attitude, objects, and key attributes will follow the media's lead. Control. The predictions are testable by using content analysis, surveys, and quantitative tests by informing the researcher of the media agenda and public opinion. Journal articles. How is the theory used to conduct research in these articles? The public disclosure of environmental performance information, a dual test of media agenda setting theory and legitimacy theory. Overview. Study done in Australia of the relationship between the print media coverage given to certain industries' environmental effects and the levels of annual report environmental disclosures made by a sample of firms within those industries. Method. 9 industries are reviewed from the years 1981 through 84. The article uses agenda setting theory to develop a testable hypothesis. The media can be particularly effective in driving the community's concern about the environmental performance of a particular organization. Results. For the majority of the industry studied, higher levels of media attention are associated with higher levels of reporting. Effects of mass and interpersonal communication on breast cancer screening. Overview. This study examines the effects of mass and interpersonal communication on breast cancer screening practices among college and middle-aged women. Method. 2 hypotheses were made. Interpersonal sources of information, such as family members and health practitioners, will be more influential than mass media as predictors of breast cancer screening among younger female participants. And mass media sources of information, such as newspapers and magazines, will be more influential than interpersonal sources as predictors of breast cancer screening among older, middle-aged female participants. Data was taken from surveys during the fall of 2002 from a sample of 284 individuals, including 126 young women enrolled in a large introductory course in public relations at a land-grant university in the Southeast, as well as the mothers of these students. To verify that the mothers completed the questionnaires themselves, they were instructed to sign across the seal of the envelope containing their completed questionnaires. The envelopes that were returned not signed were thrown away. The results supported both hypotheses. Young women who had discussed breast cancer with a relative, a practitioner, or had family history of breast cancer adhered to recommended screening practices in significantly higher numbers than those who did not. Middle-aged women who were exposed to a news magazine article about breast cancer received mammograms more frequently than those who were not.